So we have our color, and this is where about we should be today, okay? Or sometime today. What we want to get to is here, okay, where we start putting shadow values in. So we're going to create another layer here beneath our line layer and above all our color layer, okay? So let's call this shadow 2, because this is what I'm going to work on. And what we're going to do is the same kind of thing we've been doing. So let's start. I'm going to put a little cast shadow here off his fin or whatever that thing is. Now, what we don't want to, there's a lot of different ways to do this, but this is a fairly simple way to do this. I'm going to get rid of this line. We don't need this line. And then I'm going to go up here to my swatches, and I'm going to pick a fairly, for now, I'd say this value gray, okay? Now, why am I picking a gray? Because it's neutral. And if you guys remember our overlays in Photoshop, when we had a neutral color, it'll kind of lay over the color above it if we go to multiply. Now, we have the same overlays here, okay? Except that it lives in a different place. And this part, Windows, is where all our palettes live, just like in Photoshop, okay? So we have one here in this, under these windows called transparency, okay? And just remember that it has everything to do with transparency, okay? This is where your overlays live. If you remember in Photoshop, they live under layers, all right? Here they live under transparency, okay? So I'm gonna go multiply. And see how it assumes that shadow value? For this type of thing, it works really great because I don't have to go in and keep finding all these different colors, shadow value colors. Sometimes with things like flesh tones and things, I'll tweak them a little bit, or I might go to a color or something just because of the warmth of that, or I might go to a warm gray. These are cooler grays. Same thing. Multiply. So now let's go to a different color. Let's go here. I'm going to go here. I'll just put it here. Now we're on a red color, reddish color. I'm going to go multiply. And see how it just assumes it? Now, sometimes I'm going to come back to my transparency and pull back the opacity a little bit if I think it's too much. Okay? And I could just start doing this. I could have a cast shadow here of this. Does that make sense? So we're just going to keep that same. And the other thing I can do here is once I establish this, let's say I do one, I'm going to put one across this whole thing here. Don't be as sloppy as I am right now. Now I could just go grab my eyedropper and just pick what's already here, and it's just going to pick up the same overlay and color. Okay? So I just need that one gray. I can go through the whole thing and do the whole shadow value everywhere. Make sense? Okay, so see this shape here? Again, this is like reusing our assets, okay? So we have this shape that we created, right? This color, this, right? Let's get rid of all this other stuff. I'm going to drop this down a little bit so I have a little more room. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to reuse this shape. I'm going to option drag it, okay? I'm going to grab a shadow value. For some reason, this machine is not switching colors, which is really annoying. So let's just pick that color. So I'm going to put it back up here behind it. Okay, so here's something we need to learn. Under Object, Arrange, we can put things behind or in front of things, okay? So I'm going to go Object, Arrange, Send to Back. So now it's behind it, okay? So now I'm just going to drop this down. And now I got a little shadow, cast shadow on there. Okay? Now, I also could come here if you wanted to. I kind of like it with a hard edge like that. I could come here and go, just like in Photoshop, it's under Effect, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And let's go Preview so we can see what we're doing. And I could dial this in and give it just a little bit of blur if we wanted to do that. Okay? Make sense? Just put it behind it, grab the top. We're not going to scale it, so we're not going to hold our Shift key. We're just going to pull it down. And it just kind of gives the appearance of like a cast shadow of that shape. It's not totally accurate, but it's fine. It looks fine. Okay, so let's look at a couple things here, you guys. Because we've been talking about, we've made shapes now, Kelsey. We've made shapes now, and we've talked a lot about line. Okay? So I want to start talking about, so let's look at, one thing I like about Illustrator is they kind of group their tools in a little more coherent way to me than Photoshop, I think. So if we're working with line, under Object, all our path stuff, or we're working with paths actually, are living right here, under Object, under Path, okay? So we have a couple of different ones I want to talk about here. One of them is, so let's take a, and this will start making sense. Okay, all this stuff I'll throw online today or tomorrow that I'm talking about, okay? So you don't have to take notes or anything. And then Monday we're going to dive into this. I'm really giving you more of a heads up, and we'll start using all these tools and they'll make more sense, okay? So let's fatten up this line. Let's look at a couple things like under stroke right here. We can come here, and if you look here, they have what's called cap. So look at this end right here. If I hit here, I can get a rounded end, okay? Square, and there's different, different corners and things like that, okay? I can do a dashed line right here, okay? And I can change the thickness of that right here. I'm going to go to 6 point. So it gets narrower. Now the other thing I can do here is I can go to Object, Path, because that's where all of our path tools live, and go, okay, so right now, this is a line, correct? So if I grab this, I can pull it. I don't want it filled. I can, pull the handles on it, all that stuff. But sometimes you're going to want to go here and go Path, Outline Stroke. And what happens there is this is now not a line, it's a shape. Okay? Does that make sense? And the reason for that, it'll make sense as we go along. But, I can still reshape it. I just can't reshape it as a line. Okay? But I can reshape it as a shape. And sometimes you're going to need to do that. Okay? So that's where that lives. Now, another thing we can do, let's say we make a complex shape. Let's narrow it down here. And I don't like that kink on it, so I'm going to get rid of it. And I want to offset this because I want to make it like an exterior shape or something like that, but I want it to follow it correctly, right? So I can go here to Object, Path, Offset, Path. Oh, here it is. It'll give me this window, and I want to hit Preview. We always want to hit Preview, okay? So it's got a predetermined thing in here, which we're just going to use for now. You see how it offset that? Okay? Now, I usually use points because I don't understand decimals at all. So I usually will go, like, let's try 4 point. Okay? And I hit Preview, and I go, that's not enough. So I'm going to try 20 point. Okay, so that's not bad. Now, the other thing I could do is I could put a negative here in front of it, and it's going to go on the interior. Okay, so I might want to go, let's get rid of that negative. Oops. Oops. Where's that? There it goes. Okay. And I'm just filling two different shapes and getting a line, but it's going to follow it right. If you try and create that shape by pulling it, it won't follow it right. It'll actually go, it won't be right. Okay. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about here now, this is going to become important. So let's take two shapes. Now I'm going to open another thing, by the way, you guys, right here in your dock right here, I can take, I don't want this. Let's get rid of that. Let's get rid of that. We can take all our windows and we can just pull them over here into this dock so they're not floating all over the place, okay? And if you just pull them over here, they'll lock into the dock and you can pull them up and put them in whatever order you want. That way you can just pop them out here and they're not floating all over your, it gets confusing when they're all over the place. Plus it's covering up your workspace. All right, so let's look at these two. Okay, so under Windows, where all our palettes live, is Pathfinder, which I already have over here, right? Or maybe I don't. So let's open Pathfinder right here. So I'm going to take this and put it in my dock right there. And I'm going to close this for now. Okay, so when we start working on this project or any project, we want to work smart. Now, when I first started working in Illustrator, I went and drew everything, but it was really stupid, okay? Because it takes way longer and you don't end up with anything better. So if you look at Pathfinder, these little icons right here and down here, we're going to go through this to this to this here, okay? They tell you, they give you a little visual representation of what's going to happen here. So the first one is unite, okay? So if I have these two shapes, if I select both of them and I select this, they're going to become one shape, okay? Let's take the same two shapes. Whatever's on top on this one here, if you look at it, showing this shape, punching out another shape, okay? So whatever shape's on top is going to punch that bottom shape. So let's select those two, and it punches out that shape. Does that make sense? We could also do this. Let's see if I can do it. Let's see if they, I don't know if we still have Ed in here. Yeah. I don't know if it'll do it while it's still type, active type, but we'll see. No. Okay, so I have to outline this type. So under type, I'm going to go create outline. That just outlines a type. So I want to do the same one we just did and see how it punches it out. Okay, you'll see that a lot with infographics, like these simple circles and they punch a shape out of it. Okay. Okay, so let's take another one. Now this one, if you look at it, it shows the intersection right there. That's what it's going to keep, right? So I'm going to select both of these and hit this one, and it keeps that intersection. Okay. This next one, if you notice, it's empty. It does the opposite. It knocks out the intersection. And then the last one I just want to talk about real quick. Let's make this a little more complex. So now I'm going to go here to divide, okay? So when you first click it, it doesn't really show anything. But what it actually did, if I take my, okay, so if we take our black arrow tool, remember that grabs everything? We don't want to do that. So I'm going to take the white arrow tool, and it divided this up. So I can come in here, and I can take any of these pieces and get rid of them. Okay? And you're going to start using this a lot. And one of the ways that we use it, so again, let's look at, I want to look at this right here. So let's look at this real quick. This car, okay, another thing, we can group our objects. I don't know if I've talked about this. If I have a group of objects, I can select all these objects. I go up here to Object and go Group, and it will group them together. And whenever I grab them, it'll grab them as a group and move them around. When I don't want that to happen, like right now it's grouped, okay, I go to ungroup. And this has been grouped a couple of times, so I'm going to ungroup. There it goes. Okay, so I had this shape, okay? I had this shape basically, right? You know, and then I just built these black circles and I threw them in there. But what I did for this reflection on the side of the car, so I created a secondary shape. I grab my shape, I create a secondary shape so I can work with it and not worry about losing it. So let's do that like that. Oops. Like that. And then I just created this shape following the contour of the car. And then out here I don't care. And then I'm going to go, let's try our intersection here. It just saves that. For some reason, this computer does not want to fill. There it goes. I'm just going to darken this because it won't let me select a. Let's just darken it to like, that's too much. I'm going to darken a little too much, but that's all right. So what that does now is I just built my reflection shape like that. Okay. Then like if you look at like certain things like here where I have this highlight, I just took this again, and now I just remember our option drag where it creates a copy? I'm also going to hold shift, and it'll just drag it straight down. And now I'm going to use this one, which cuts them out. I'll get rid of these bottom pieces. I don't need these. And now I'm going to go here. I'm going to go to a lighter value. Let's go there. And now I get this color, right? And if you look at all these things, that's how I built all of it. This whole thing was built just with the shape tools for the most part. Does that make sense? All this, all the highlights on all this car probably took, 15, 20 minutes to make, right? Same thing with him. If you take this apart, this is a very shapy program. We're just piling shapes. It's like cut paper. This program is just cut paper.
Oh, paper dolls.
It is paper dolls. That's what it is. That's exactly what it is. So look at here. This is grouped. I want to ungroup it. If we start tearing this apart, it's just a bunch of shapes. Flat shapes. So just think of it as cut paper. Okay, and then you got to get a little bit clever, like, with this suit. I just use line to show, as a graphic element to show his, just to break it up. And same thing here, if you go here on his mic, all the shiny stuff and everything are just big shapes. Okay? So it's basically, I used to actually do this with cut paper before Illustrator. I would use big cut paper and I'd create this kind of stuff, right? Which was a giant pain. Okay, this back here is more or less just a silhouette. Okay, so here's what's also cool about this. This foliage here, I had in another illustration. I go back to, because I have a ton of illustrations from 100 years ago and all that stuff. I'll go back and go, oh, I got plants in that one I can use. So I went back to another one I have, and I grabbed this shape because it was in another one, and then I just come in here and I just duplicated the same shape. And then this is the same shape in a different color, right? So I'm just recycling, and then if you look back here, it's the same shape, only in a different color, and I kind of mashed it and changed it a little bit, right? Really simple. These are repeating. I'm just taking that same shape and repeating it, repeating it, okay? And what I like about, because we just started learning, if you look at this, this is a really simplified shape, that space shuttle, okay? I like So we just took our image, we dropped it in, ghosted it back, right? So I like to work like, these are just little doodles I did like at McDonald's or whatever. And then that's all I worked from. Little 5-minute doodles, right? So here, let's look at this. And some of these I built on their own like this, okay? And then I popped them in there. Because one thing I like about Illustrator is like I started with the idea of John parachuting in. I kind of did that. And then I didn't have any other idea. I didn't have any stuff. And I kind of went, oh, and put City Hall back there, right? So then I went and did City Hall, right? But the City Hall also was just based on a really simple doodle, right? And I just kind of fixed it as I built it, right? So all this stuff, I mean, these are all little 5-minute doodles. And then if you look at, now you'll get more and more comfortable with that, and it's fine if you want to do a more detailed drawing, that's all fine. And you don't have to, by the way, everybody, you don't have to have draftsmanship skills and all this stuff. I'm going to show you how to, when we sit down and we decide what we're going to do, I'll help you how you're going to create your image, okay? Because it doesn't have to be hand-drawn and all that. Same thing here, I made, I think, 2 different butterflies, and I just repeated them, right? Does that make sense? Really simple, flat shape. I think that's all I want to tell you right now. So I just want you to remember, we're going to start using Pathfinder, and that all your path tools live in that under Object, under Path, okay? And Monday, what we're going to start doing, we'll start on this project and we'll start adding tools into it as we're rolling through it.